Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about domain and range. Let's start with some vocabulary. The first vocabulary that we're going to talk about is something called an independent variable. Independent variable is the variable that will happen on its own. The dependent variable is the variable that depends on another variable. These two here should be familiar from your science classes. Alright, now let's go down and talk about domain and range. Domain is all of the x values of a relation, and your range is all of the y values of a relation. When we go to write out domain and range of a relation, we have three specific requirements that we must follow every single time. First, they have to be written in order from least to greatest. Next, you cannot have any repeating numbers, so if a number repeats, you only write it down once. And last, they must be inside of braces, or I like to call them curly brackets. Alright, so let's take a look at this down here. And what we're going to do is label the following representations just with the domain and range. So we're not actually writing them out, but we're just kind of showing you where you would find the domain and range of each representation. Alright, so in a mapping diagram, the first group would be your domain. The second group would be your range. In an ordered pair, the first value would be a value in your domain. The second value would be a value in your range. In a table, the x column or the x row would be your domain, and the y column, or if it were written horizontally, the y row would be your range. Okay, when we talk about a graph, the x values that are used for the points is your domain. Our range are the y values used for the points, so whatever the specific points are. So similar to what we have here, just now in graph form. So this point here is x value is -2. That -2 would be part of your domain. The y value is 3. So 3 would be part of your range. All right, let's go to the next page. And let's just review function. Function is what we talked about last class. So just as a remember, it's a relation in which each x value is paired with only one y value. All right, so now we're going to come down and we're going to determine the domain, the range, and then if it's a function or not, just as a review. All right, so here we have our mapping. So remember, our domain comes from that first group of numbers. So when we write it, we have to make sure that we write it in order from least to greatest. We don't repeat any numbers, and we put it inside those braces or those curly brackets. So my 0, 1, 2, and 3. My range is what we find inside this bubble. In this case, there's only one number listed. That one number gets used 1, 2, 3, 4 times though, because each of my x values got paired up with that -1. So it got used 4 times. But when we go to write our range, we write it once, just -1. All right, now if we come back and we look, is this a function? So think back to last time, and since each x value is only used once, we say that yes, it is a function. All right, try this one on your own. Go ahead, determine the domain, the range, and is it a function? Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, let's come down here to this next example. Now we have a set of ordered pairs. So we're going to determine our domain and our range. So our domain, remember, is all of our x values. So I've got a -1, 0, 1, and 2. So we're going to write them in order least to greatest. And they happen to already be in order least to greatest for me, which is great. I didn't repeat any numbers, and I have it inside the curly brackets. Now let's do the range. So now we have the 4, the 5, the 6, and the -7. So this time we have to make sure that we write it in order least to greatest because it's currently not in that correct order. So that -7 has to be bumped up to the front, and then I could have my 4, 5, and 6. And then everything is inside the curly brackets. All right, now, is this a function? Well, let's check our x values. -1, 0, 1, and 2. Yes, it is, because none of my x values repeat. All right, I want you to try this one here on your own. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, let's go to the next page. Now, let's take a look at a table. My domain and range from the tables, and then we're going to determine if it's a function. So my domain is all my x values, range is all my y values. Nice thing about a table is usually the x values, at least, are always in order from least to greatest. The y values are not always, so you have to check. The x values usually are. So my domain is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My range is the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. Nothing repeated in there, and it happens to already be in order for me from least to greatest. Right? And then last, is it a function? Yes, it is, because none of my x values repeated. All right, I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. Remember, they have to be written in order from least to greatest, no repeats, and in curly brackets. Go ahead and pause your video now. All right, let's take a look at the next example. Peter coaches soccer clinics and charges $15 per player. T stands for the total amount of money he makes, and P stands for the number of players that sign up. Identify the independent and dependent variables. All right, so we're not solving anything here. We just have to just figure out which variable depends on the other variable. So we have T, which stands for the total amount of money he makes, and then we have P, which stands for the number of players that sign up. So we have to figure out which one depends on the other. Does the amount of money he makes depend on the number of players that sign up, or do the number of players that sign up depend on the amount of money he makes? Well, I'm going to say that this total amount of money, or T, depends on the number of players that sign up. So you want to make sure you kind of think about those and see if you can figure out who depends on who. All right, try this one on your own, and then once you've done this, your notes are complete. I'll see you next class. Just double check, yep. I'll see you next class. Please make sure all your try on your owns are completed. Have a good day.